Welcome to your cozy corner of the internet, dedicated to soothing sleep stories for gamers. Please gently consider subscribing, close your eyes, and drift through this tale of a city in the clouds, choices, and infinite echoes. Part 1. The Man and the Debt. There is a man named Booker DeWitt, and he is running from himself. Picture him now, seated in a small rowboat, cutting through dark waters beneath a moonless sky. The year is 1912. The world is young and brutal, and Booker carries both qualities in equal measure. Two strangers row the boat, a man and a woman. Twins, perhaps, though something about them feels displaced, as if they exist slightly out of phase with the rest of reality. They speak in riddles and half-answers, the way people do when they already know how the story ends. On Booker's lap rests a simple wooden case. Inside, a photograph of a young woman, dark hair, innocent eyes. On the back, 3 words scrawled in hurried handwriting: "Bring us the girl." And beneath that, a promise that feels more like a threat. Wipe away the debt. Booker DeWitt knows about debt. It is the architecture of his life, built room by room through poor choices and worse luck. Gambling debts, moral debts, the kind of debts that accumulate in a man's chest until he can barely breathe. He does not ask questions about this mission because desperate men rarely do. A girl for his freedom. It seems simple enough, but nothing about Booker DeWitt is simple. He was born in 1874, part Sioux on his mother's side, though he learned early to hide this heritage like a shameful secret. At 16, too young, too eager, he joined the 7th Cavalry and rode to a place called Wounded Knee. What happened there on December 29th, 1890, would be called many things: a massacre, a battle, a stain on the American soul. Booker participated with a zeal that frightened even his fellow soldiers. He scalped the dead. He burned occupied teepees to the ground. He earned a nickname, the White Injun, and wore it like armor against accusations about his ancestry. They called him a hero. They gave him medals. And every night after, in the dark behind his eyes, he saw the faces of those he had killed. Women, children, unarmed men trying to protect their families. The screams never faded. The smoke never cleared. After his discharge, guilt drove him to a river baptism conducted by a preacher named Whiting. The holy man promised rebirth, promised that all sins could be washed clean in the waters of forgiveness. Booker stood in that river, feeling the current pull at his legs, and at the last moment, he walked away. Because some sins are too heavy for water to carry. Some things cannot be forgiven. He became a Pinkerton agent, using violence to break strikes and intimidate workers. He married a woman named Annabelle. They had a daughter, Anna. But Annabelle died in childbirth, and Booker descended further into darkness. Drinking, gambling, the slow suicide of a man who cannot bear his own reflection. The debts piled up like bodies at Wounded Knee. And then the twins appeared with their offer, and Booker made a choice he would regret before the ink dried on the deal. He sold his daughter, his infant child, his Anna, handed her over to pay what he owed. The moment her small fingers left his, he tried to take her back. There was a doorway, not a doorway, something else, a tear in the fabric of everything, and as it closed, it severed the tip of her pinky finger. She screamed. He screamed. The door sealed. And then, nothing. A hole in his memory where his daughter should have been. His mind, unable to process the trauma and the impossibility, wrote a new story. Forget the daughter. Remember, only the mission. Bring us the girl. Wipe away the debt. The rowboat reaches a lighthouse, solitary and strange, rising from a small island in the middle of nowhere. The twins bid him farewell with knowing smiles, and Booker climbs toward his destiny with no idea that he is actually descending into his past. At the top of the lighthouse, he finds a chair, no, a capsule, and a series of bells that must be rung in a particular order. He does not question how he knows the sequence. He rings the bells, and the chair becomes a rocket, and suddenly Booker DeWitt is shooting upward through clouds, an impossible physics towards something that should not exist. A city in the sky? Columbia. Part 2. The City in the Clouds. Imagine paradise as a lie wrapped in sunlight. Columbia emerges from the clouds like a fever dream of America's self-mythology. Neoclassical buildings float on invisible quantum fields, suspended 15,000 feet above the Earth. Streets connect through the air via magnetic rails. Zeppelins drift between platforms like lazy fish in an aquarium of sky. Everything is white marble and gold leaf. Columns and statues, the aesthetic of ancient Rome filtered through turn-of-the-century American bombast. This is a city that believes in its own perfection. Booker's capsule docks at a structure called the Welcome Center, and he emerges into brightness that feels aggressive after the dark waters below. Immediately, he is surrounded by religious imagery. Banners depicting three men, the founding fathers of America, Washington, Jefferson, Franklin, rendered like saints in stained glass. But higher than them all, one face repeated everywhere. Father Zachary Hale Comstock, the Prophet of Columbia, rendered in heroic bronze and marble, his expression serene and terrible. Before Booker can enter the city proper, he must pass through a baptism. There is no choice in this. Preacher Whiting, blind with cataracts, eyes like milk, presides over the ceremony with fervent devotion. The water is cold. The words wash over Booker like a recurring nightmare. He has been here before in a different river, facing a different choice. But his memory is a fractured thing, and he lets himself be submerged, lets himself be reborn into Columbia. Washed clean in the waters of baptism, Whiting intones, and Booker rises, dripping, into what Columbia calls paradise. The city unfolds like a propaganda poster brought to three-dimensional life. The sun shines perpetually. Music drifts from gramophones and live performances. Barbershop quartets singing on street corners. Patriotic marches echoing through plazas. Citizens stroll in their finest clothing, everything pressed and proper. Women in long skirts and elaborate hats. Men in suits that cost more than most people earn in a year. Children chase balloons. Vendors sell cotton candy and caramel apples. But Booker, for all his failings, knows how to read a room. And this room is wrong. The first clue comes in the form of signs. Pilgrims welcome, they say, but the subtext whispers, others are not. He sees separate bathrooms labeled white and colored, separate water fountains, separate sections of the city. Columbia's perfection is built on a foundation of exclusion, its paradise reserved for a chosen few. In the plaza, Booker encounters a raffle, a cheerful festival attraction where the winner gets to throw a baseball at a bound interracial couple displayed on a stage like carnival attractions. The crowd cheers. The couple, an Irish man and a black woman, kneel in terror while the crowd places bets on whether the winner will hit them. Booker's number is called. He wins. The crowd roars. And as he stands there, baseball in hand, the mark on his hand is revealed. A D branded into his skin. Suddenly, recognition ripples through the crowd. Someone shouts, "It's the false shepherd! The one from the prophecy!" Because Father Comstock, in his infinite prophetic wisdom, has warned his people. A false shepherd will come, marked AD upon his hand, and he will steal away the Lamb of Columbia, the prophet's daughter. And here stands Booker, marked exactly as foretold, surrounded by citizens who believe he is destined to destroy their perfect world. Violence erupts. Booker fights. He is very good at fighting, and battles his way through Columbia's police forces toward Monument Island, where the girl is supposedly held. Along the way, the city's true face reveals itself in glimpses. Propaganda posters showing white angelic figures defeating caricatured minorities. Automated machines called motorized patriots, crude robot amalgams of George Washington, patrolling with Gatling guns. Audio logs scattered throughout the city, recordings of citizens discussing racial purity, worker exploitation, and religious zealotry with casual certainty. This is a theocracy masquerading as utopia. A city where Father Comstock's word is law, where the founding principles of America have been twisted into something unrecognizable. Where the American dream floats above the clouds, unreachable for most, exclusive for the chosen. Monument Island rises before Booker like a massive stone finger pointing at heaven. At its peak, a golden statue of an angel, Columbia's symbol of divinity. But this angel is not guarding paradise. It is a prison. Inside, in the highest tower, past elaborate security systems and observation equipment, Booker finds her, Elizabeth. Part 3. The Girl Between Worlds. She is 19 years old and has spent nearly her entire life in one room. Elizabeth sits surrounded by books, hundreds of them, thousands perhaps, stacked in precarious towers that serve as both education and escape. She has learned 17 languages from these books. She has studied quantum mechanics and art history, philosophy and music theory. She can pick any lock ever made. She plays piano with the skill of a concert performer. She knows everything about the world outside her tower, except what it feels like to actually exist in it. When Booker breaks through the door, her first instinct is fear. She throws books at him, heavy ones, the kind that hurt. This is not how she imagined rescue. In her dreams, rescue came with explanation, with gentleness, with reason. This man, rough-edged and violent, covered in blood from the men he killed to reach her, looks nothing like a savior. "I'm here to take you to Paris," Booker tells her, because that is what she has always wanted, what she has drawn in countless sketches, painted in watercolors pinned to her walls. The Eiffel Tower, the Louvre, freedom. But Elizabeth is not naive. She has been locked away, yes, but she has been watching. Through her windows, she has seen Columbia below, seen the propaganda, the controlled society, the carefully maintained illusions, and she has seen something else, something she barely understands herself. She sees tears in reality. Not crying, though there has been plenty of that in her isolation, but actual rips in the fabric of space and time. Windows into other worlds, other possibilities. Sometimes she sees Paris itself, not as a distant dream, but as a literal doorway she could step through if only she understood how. These visions have plagued her since childhood, growing stronger as she grew older, until the boundaries between what is real and what might be real have become dangerously thin. Before they can escape, Songbird arrives. Imagine a creature that should not exist. A massive mechanical bird, all bronze and brass and terrible beauty, with eyes that glow with murderous devotion. Songbird was Elizabeth's only companion growing up, programmed to care for her, to play with her, to keep her safe. But safety and captivity are sometimes the same thing, and as Elizabeth matured, Songbird became her warden, attacking anyone who came near, screeching warnings whenever she approached the edges of her prison. The bond between them is love twisted into something grotesque. Songbird does not want to hurt Elizabeth. It wants to protect her by keeping her trapped. It loves her the way a cage loves a bird. The creature tears through Monument Island's structure, and Booker and Elizabeth flee through collapsing corridors and shattering glass. They escape onto Columbia's sky rails, magnetic tracks that crisscross between the floating platforms, and slide away from Songbird's rage, the city's beautiful facades blurring past them at impossible speeds. When they finally stop, gasping in a quiet garden away from immediate danger, Elizabeth looks at Booker with new eyes. She sees the mark on his hand. She remembers Comstock's prophecies about the false shepherd. And she begins to understand that her rescue might be something more complicated than simple salvation. They travel together through Columbia's various districts, and Elizabeth reveals herself to be far more than a damsel in distress. When Booker needs ammunition, she finds it, seemingly sensing where supplies are hidden. When they face locked doors, her lockpicks make short work of even the most complex mechanisms. And when they are cornered by enemies, she opens tears. It starts small. A crate of medical supplies appearing from nowhere, a defense turret blinking into existence to provide covering fire. But as they progress, as the danger increases, Elizabeth's powers grow stronger and stranger. She pulls entire objects from other realities. Weapons, walls, machines. She opens windows to places and times that should not be accessible. These abilities exhaust her, leave her nose bleeding and hands shaking. But she persists because freedom is worth any cost. Yet she does not understand where these powers come from, why she alone can bend reality like clay. She does not know that her gift is the result of a severed finger, of existing simultaneously in two worlds, of being the bridge between infinite possibilities. As they journey deeper into Columbia, seeking a way to escape the city entirely, Elizabeth witnesses the true face of Comstock's paradise. In a district called Finkton, they encounter the industrial heart of Columbia, factories where Irish and black workers labor in conditions that make hell seem hospitable. Jeremiah Fink, Columbia's industrialist, has built his empire on exploitation, paying workers in scrip that can only be spent at company stores, housing them in slums while the wealthy drift overhead in luxury. Here, Elizabeth meets the Vox Populi, the voice of the people, a revolutionary group led by a woman named Daisy Fitzroy. The Vox fight for equality, for workers' rights, for an end to Columbia's racial hierarchy. But their methods are violent, their anger justified but terrifying in its intensity. Elizabeth's idealism begins to fracture. The clear lines between good and evil that she imagined from her tower, where rescuers were heroes and captors were villains, blur into something more complex. Booker is trying to save her, yes, but he is also using her to pay a debt. Comstock imprisoned her, but he raised her with genuine, if twisted, affection. The Vox fight for justice, but their revolution leaves innocent bodies in the streets. The world, Elizabeth discovers, is not a storybook. It is messy and morally ambiguous and full of people making terrible choices for understandable reasons. And then comes the moment that changes everything. Searching for a gunsmith who can help them escape Columbia, they find him already dead in one reality. So Elizabeth opens a tear to a world where he still lives. But the transition is imperfect, traumatic. The gunsmith Chen Lin exists in the new reality, but his memories are scattered, his mind fractured by being merged with an alternate version of himself. Blood drips from his nose. He speaks in confused fragments about a wife who is and isn't dead, about tools he both has and doesn't have. They've damaged him by pulling him between worlds, and Elizabeth realizes with horror that her gift, her power, can also be a curse. The situation escalates. To get the tools they need, Elizabeth opens more tiers, makes more changes, until they find themselves in a Colombia where the Vox Populi's revolution has succeeded violently. Bodies hang from lampposts, buildings burn. Daisy Fitzroy has become what she fought against, a tyrant claiming righteous authority through bloodshed. In this timeline, Booker is already dead, martyred for the cause, which makes the living Booker an impossibility that Daisy attempts to rectify. And in a warehouse filled with Fink's confiscated luxury goods, Elizabeth watches Daisy prepare to murder a child, Jeremiah Fink's young son, to make a point about revolution sparing no one. Elizabeth kills her, picks up a pair of scissors and drives them into Daisy's back before conscious thought can intervene. The girl who dreamed of Paris, who read books about philosophy and played piano in her tower, has become a killer, and something inside her breaks that can never be fully repaired. Booker holds her while she cries, this girl he is supposed to deliver like cargo, this person who has become something more complicated than his mission parameters. They are both monsters now, both carrying fresh blood on their hands, both learning that survival requires compromises that cannot be washed away by any baptism. But they push forward because there is no going back, only through. They commandeer an airship, the First Lady, ironically, and prepare to finally escape Columbia's madness. Then Songbird finds them again. The massive bird machine tears through the airship's hull with talons that rend metal like paper. Elizabeth screams for it to stop, but Songbird only knows one directive: bring her home. Bring her back to the tower. Keep her safe by keeping her imprisoned. The airship crashes, and when Elizabeth wakes, she is once again in Monument Island, once again in her familiar room. But now the walls feel like they are closing in. Comstock is there, speaking gently, explaining that everything will be better now, that she simply needs to accept her role, accept her destiny as Columbia's future leader. They show her visions, prophecies, of herself decades older, leading armies, burning cities, drowning New York in fire and revolution. They show her that Booker DeWitt will betray her, that he is not her savior, but her doom. And through torture, both psychological and physical, through sleep deprivation and fear, they try to break her back into the obedient daughter Comstock always wanted. Elizabeth almost believes them, almost surrenders, because it would be easier, wouldn't it, to accept the role, to stop fighting, to let someone else make all the difficult decisions. But then Booker comes for her again, bloody, beaten, but persistent in a way that feels less like determination and more like penance. And Elizabeth makes a choice. She chooses the false shepherd over the prophet. She chooses uncertainty over certainty. She chooses freedom, even if it costs everything. They find a device called the Whistler, a control mechanism that can command Songbird. Elizabeth takes it, and with tears streaming down her face, she turns her former friend and guardian against Comstock's forces. Songbird, confused and hurt but obedient to the device's signals, tears through Columbia's military in a rampage of protective violence. But Elizabeth knows this cannot last. She knows that Songbird will eventually break free, will eventually come for her again, will never stop trying to bring her home until one of them is destroyed. So she makes her first conscious, deliberate tear. Not a small one, not a window or a doorway, but a massive rip in reality that swallows them all. her, Booker, and Songbird, and deposits them somewhere impossible. Rapture. They appear underwater in the ruins of another failed utopia, another city built on impossible dreams. Andrew Ryan's underwater objectivist paradise, now collapsed into madness and chaos. Songbird, unable to survive the pressure at these depths, implodes against a window, its metal body crushing inward as water floods its mechanisms. Elizabeth watches her oldest companion die and feels nothing but relief, mixed with grief. Another death on her conscience, another price paid for freedom. But they are not here for Rapture's story. Elizabeth brought them here to prove a point, to show Booker that her powers are beyond anything they previously understood. Because in the moment she destroyed the siphon, the device that had been limiting her abilities since childhood, Elizabeth became something more than human. She can now see all timelines, all possibilities, every choice ever made and every outcome that resulted. Past, present, and future collapse into a single, overwhelming vision of infinite complexity. And in that vision, she sees the truth. She sees Comstock, she sees Booker, and she sees that they are the same man. Part 4. The Truth of Booker and Comstock. Memory is a story we tell ourselves, edited and revised until it makes sense. Elizabeth takes Booker's hand and they step through another tear, this one leading to a place that is not a place, a metaphysical crossroads between all possible realities. Lighthouses stretch in every direction, infinite variations on an infinite theme, each one a doorway, each one a choice, each one a world where things went differently. A man, a lighthouse, a city, Elizabeth says, her voice carrying the weight of omniscience. There's always a man, always a lighthouse, always a city, constants and variables, constants, the unchanging truths that exist across all realities, variables, the choices that make each reality unique. She explains as they walk through this impossible space, and slowly, painfully, Booker begins to remember what his mind had hidden from him. After Wounded Knee, after the massacre, a young soldier named Booker DeWitt stood in a river before Preacher Whitting. His hands were covered in blood, both literal and metaphorical. His soul was heavy with the weight of what he had done to prove his loyalty, to escape accusations about his heritage, to be accepted as fully American. Women dead, children burned, an entire people traumatized for generations. Whitting offered him rebirth, offered him the chance to become a new man, washed clean of sin, forgiven by divine grace. And at that moment, reality split. In one world, Booker refused. He pulled away from Whitting's grasp and walked out of that river, believing that some sins are unforgivable, that he did not deserve mercy, that he must carry his guilt like a cross for the rest of his life. This Booker descended into alcoholism, violence, and self-destruction. He became a Pinkerton agent who broke strikes with brutality. He married Annabelle, had a daughter named Anna, lost his wife, and eventually sold his child to pay gambling debts. But in another world, in another timeline, in another reality, just one choice away. Booker accepted the baptism. He let himself be submerged. He let himself believe that water could wash away blood. And when he emerged, he took a new name to match his new life: Zachary Hale Comstock. This version of Booker, Comstock, twisted the experience of rebirth into justification. If God had forgiven him, then surely his actions at Wounded Knee were not sins, but necessary acts of righteousness. If he was washed clean, then clearly he had been dirty for the right reasons. The cognitive dissonance between committing atrocities and receiving divine forgiveness resolved itself through the creation of a new narrative. He was a holy warrior, chosen by God, destined for greatness. Comstock became a prophet. He claimed visions, said that an archangel showed him plans for a city in the sky that would represent American ideals in their purest form. And through a combination of religious fervor and political connections, he made it happen. But there was a cost to Comstock's hubris. He encountered a physicist named Rosalind Lutece, a genius who had discovered how to suspend atoms indefinitely, creating the quantum levitation technology that would make Columbia possible. Together, or rather with Rosalind's dimensional double Robert, whom she accidentally contacted through her experiments, they built machines that could tear open reality itself. Comstock used these machines obsessively, looking into the future, trying to predict every possible outcome to ensure his city's success. But exposure to the quantum radiation aged him prematurely and left him sterile. He could not father a biological heir. So he sent the Lutece twins back through dimensions to find a version of himself who had made different choices. They found Booker, drunk, desperate, drowning in debt. They offered him a deal. Give us your daughter, and we will clear what you owe. Booker, in his darkest moment, agreed. Anna was pulled through a tear between dimensions, from Booker's New York to Comstock's Columbia. But as the portal closed, it severed part of her pinky finger, leaving her literally existing in two realities simultaneously. This unique condition gave her the ability to control tears, to manipulate the boundaries between worlds. Comstock renamed her Elizabeth and raised her as his daughter, his heir, the Lamb of Columbia, who would fulfill his vision of American dominance spreading across the globe. He built the tower to contain her, installed the siphon to limit her powers, and surrounded her with propaganda designed to shape her into a weapon. But Comstock underestimated what he had created. Elizabeth was not just a tool. She was a person, with her own will, her own dreams, her own capacity for love and hate and everything between. And she was also Booker's daughter, carrying her biological father's stubbornness, his tendency toward violence, his deep capacity for both self-destruction and redemption. The Lutece twins, feeling guilt for their role in this tragedy, for stealing a child, for enabling Comstock's atrocities, for fracturing reality itself, engineered Booker's arrival in Columbia. They brought him through dimensions, scrambling his memories in the process so he wouldn't remember Anna, wouldn't remember the deal, wouldn't remember anything except a vague mission to retrieve a girl and wipe away a debt. They gave Booker a chance to undo what he, as Comstock, had done, to save his daughter, to break the cycle. Now, standing in the space between all possible worlds, Elizabeth shows Booker everything. She forces him to watch as Comstock takes baby Anna through the tear. She makes him relive the moment he tried to grab her back, the moment the portal closed on her finger, the moment he lost his daughter. She shows him the baptism, shows him the choice, shows him that every Comstock in every timeline begins with that single decision to accept false absolution. Booker falls to his knees, the weight of understanding crushing him. He is Comstock. Comstock is him. The villain he has been fighting is himself. The tyranny, the racism, the religious zealotry, the child imprisonment. All of it springs from one choice he made to believe he could be forgiven without first making amends. "I'm both," he whispers. "I'm Booker DeWitt and Zachary Hale Comstock." Elizabeth, Anna, his daughter, nods, and through tears, she explains what must happen next. The infinite loop. Across infinite dimensions, infinite versions of Booker DeWitt stand at that river baptism. Infinite choices, infinite outcomes. In some, Booker refuses baptism and destroys his life through guilt and self-loathing, eventually selling his daughter to Comstock from another reality, creating Elizabeth, starting the cycle again. In others, Booker accepts baptism, becomes Comstock, builds Columbia, steals Anna from a different Booker, imprisons her as Elizabeth, and continues his pattern of justifying atrocities through religious authority. Constants and variables. The constant. Booker DeWitt faces a choice at that baptism. The variable, which path he takes. But both paths lead to suffering. Both paths lead to Anna/Elizabeth being caught in the middle, being used, being hurt. Elizabeth, with her ability to see across all timelines, understands what others cannot. There is no timeline where Booker and Comstock both exist as separate people. They are the same person diverging at a single choice. And as long as that choice exists, as long as that baptism can go either way, the cycle continues. Comstock will always steal a daughter from Booker. Elizabeth will always be trapped between worlds. The tragedy will always repeat. Infinite variations on infinite suffering. There's only one way to stop him, Elizabeth says, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her face. We have to smother him in his crib. She means it metaphorically and literally. They must go back to the moment before the choice, the moment before the split, and prevent it from ever occurring. Not by choosing one path or the other, but by eliminating the chooser entirely. Booker understands what she's asking. She's asking him to die. Not just to die. To have never existed past that moment. To erase himself from history, from all histories, from every possible timeline. It is the only way to break the loop. The only way to ensure that no version of Booker ever becomes Comstock, never builds Columbia, never steals Anna, never imprisons Elizabeth. They walk together through tears in reality, passing through fragments of other worlds. They see Rapture again, that other failed utopia, proving Elizabeth's point about constants. A man, a lighthouse, a city. Andrew Ryan built his underwater paradise on objectivist philosophy and it collapsed into chaos. Comstock built his sky city on religious extremism and it too fell. The settings change, the ideologies shift, but the pattern remains. Visionaries building impossible worlds that ultimately fail because human nature cannot be architected away. They arrive at the river. It is night, peaceful, the water reflecting stars and moonlight. Other versions of Elizabeth stand here too. Infinite daughters from infinite timelines, all converging on this singular moment. Some wear different clothes, some have different hairstyles, but all share the same eyes, the same determination, the same sorrowful understanding of what must be done. Young Booker stands in the water with Preacher Whiting, about to make his choice. This Booker is fresh from Wounded Knee, still carrying the immediate weight of what he did there, not yet hardened by decades of guilt and self-destruction. He is, in his way, innocent, or as innocent as someone can be after committing atrocities. Older Booker, our Booker, the one who has traveled through Columbia, who has saved and been saved by his daughter, who has finally understood the full scope of his sins across infinite realities, walks into the water to meet his younger self. I know what happens, older Booker says. I choose to go through with it. I choose to refuse it. Neither ends well. The infinite Elizabeths gather around him, and one by one they place their hands on his shoulders, his head gentle but firm. I know, Booker says, and then, I'm ready. They push him under. Booker does not fight. He lets the water close over his head, lets his daughter, his daughters, all of them, hold him down. This is not murder. It is mercy. This is not violence. It is love expressed through the hardest choice imaginable. He drowns in that river before he can accept or reject the baptism. He dies before the choice can be made, before reality splits, before Booker and Comstock diverge into separate timelines. And as he dies, the infinite Elizabeths begin to vanish. One by one, they flicker out of existence, like candles being snuffed. Because without Comstock to build Columbia, without Comstock to steal baby Anna, Elizabeth, all the Elizabeths, never exist. Their entire lives, every moment they experienced, every book they read, every tear they opened, every choice they made, all of it collapses into paradox and dissolves. The last Elizabeth to remain, the original, the primary, the one who traveled furthest with Booker, stands alone for a moment at the river's edge. She looks at the water where her father's body has already sunk beneath the surface, erased from time. She does not smile. She does not celebrate. This is not a victory, it is a sacrifice. Then she too begins to fade, her form becoming transparent, becoming light, becoming nothing. The river flows on, peaceful and unconcerned with the infinite tragedies it has just unmade. Part 6. The ending. Silence and stillness. Somewhere in a small apartment in New York, a man wakes with a gasp. Booker DeWitt sits up in darkness, disoriented, as if waking from a dream that was simultaneously a lifetime and no time at all. The details are already fading. Something about a city, a girl, a choice, but the emotions remain heavy and strange in his chest. He stumbles out of bed, moving through his apartment by memory. Everything is familiar and yet somehow different, like visiting a childhood home and finding the room smaller than you remembered. In his office, on his desk, there is paperwork, gambling debts, bills overdue, all the detritus of a life lived poorly. But these debts feel manageable somehow, not insurmountable. Not the kind of weight that would make a man do something unforgivable. Booker walks toward another door, his daughter's room. His hand hesitates on the doorknob. Some part of him expects the room to be empty, expects to find nothing but absence and regret. Some deeper part remembers, in fragments and feelings, a choice he made and then unmade, a girl he lost and found and lost again. But when he opens the door, the scene fades before we see what's inside. We hear only a baby's babbling cry, surprised at being woken, and Booker's sharp intake of breath. Is Anna there? Has the cycle truly been broken? Or is this just another loop, another variation, another chance for Booker to make the same mistakes in a slightly different way? The answer exists in quantum superposition, both yes and no, there and not there, saved and lost simultaneously. Because that is the nature of infinite realities, of choices unmade and remade, of timelines folded and collapsed. What we know is this. In the realities where Booker became Comstock, those timelines have been erased. Columbia never rose into the sky. The atrocities committed in its name never occurred. The Vox Populis revolution never needed to happen. Daisy Fitzroy lived different life, fought different battles, or perhaps found peace. The workers of Finkton toiled under different oppression, or found different freedom. Songbird was never built. The Luttezi twins never tore reality open. And Elizabeth, brilliant, powerful, tragic Elizabeth, never existed. Never spent 19 years in a tower, never learned to see across dimensions, never had to make the impossible choice to erase her own father, and in doing so, erase herself. all those experiences, all that growth, all that pain and learning and becoming unmade, but perhaps not entirely forgotten. Because stories have a strange persistence, even when the storytellers cease to exist. Ideas echo across dimensions, feelings linger in the spaces between thoughts, and somewhere in Booker DeWitt's mind, as he stands at that doorway looking into his daughter's room, there might be a ghost of memory. A girl with dark hair and curious eyes, a city floating in clouds, a choice that unmade itself. Or perhaps it is simpler than that. Perhaps Booker DeWitt, in this timeline, made better choices after Wounded Knee. Perhaps he found a way to live with his guilt that did not require becoming either a prophet or a monster. Perhaps he kept his daughter. Perhaps he was simply a father, imperfect but present, carrying his past but not destroyed by it. We cannot know. The story has ended by erasing itself, a narrative that consumes its own existence. Because that is the nature of infinite realities. There's always a lighthouse. There's always a man. There's always a city. Thank you for joining us on this journey through Columbia. If you enjoyed this deep dive into BioShock Infinite, please consider leaving a like and subscribing if you'd like more sleep stories exploring the rich lore and emotional depths of your favorite games. Now, sleep well, traveler. The lighthouses will still be there tomorrow, waiting at the edges of infinite realities. But tonight, you can rest. Good night.